in doing that, once again, we have to back our blue. Thank you so much.
All right, now it goes over to Rick. And I'll read the question again, okay? What specific reforms do you advocate for to address issues such as mass incarceration, sentencing disparities, and rehabilitation programs?
So I guess with that question, folks, we've closed prisons. We haven't opened more. And we have prosecutors not prosecuting violent crime. Kim Gardner, who was just ousted and is gone, failed to prosecute over 12,000 violent crimes. People literally executed in broad daylight. So I hardly think that mass incarceration is a problem. It's a prosecution that's not occurring in these big cities. We need to have a system of justice to where prosecutors are also held accountable for not prosecuting crime. I passed a provision that's now law, prohibits the defunding of police. You know why? Because Kansas City just tried to defund by a massive margin our police departments and not protecting the men and women who are fighting them at the front lines. So we've got to get tougher on crime. We've got to stop acquiescing to these crimes and letting them go free. You know, it's really telling when you go to these areas when they say crime is down. Well, of course, crime is going to be down when you're not prosecuting it. You're not bringing charges. You're not doing anything to actually bring that in. So you'll foster exactly what is occurring in your town. So those are the things we've got to do. I say we also have to fund our public defenders. So that's one thing that is a real huge disparity, and we saw a ruling out of the Supreme Court to where they started letting people out of jail without bail because we couldn't fund a public defender for a speedy trial, which actually led to the courts letting people out in droves. So we got to fund the public defenders just like we funded the prosecution side to ensure that we have an equal justice system all along and all across the board. That's how we're going to really fight crime.
All right. Mike, you prefer Mike or Michael?
Either one is fine.
Okay, well, you're next.
Okay.
I'll read the question again. What specific reforms do you advocate for to address such issues such as mass incarceration, sentencing disparities, and rehabilitation programs?
Well, first and foremost, it starts with law enforcement. We got to have them, get them the tools they need to get the job done. Going across Cass County, even the law enforcement agencies here, going down to Bates County, they are not manned at the proper levels. That is the starting point. Number two, I believe what Rick said with the prosecution, we have got to make sure that the criminals are held accountable. We did some bail reform here in the state of Missouri. That did not work out well. And there were some statistics that were listed even within the state of Missouri as to how many nonviolent criminals there are. And that's been brought up on the floor of the Missouri House. Here's the problem. There's a big difference what someone is charged with initially and what they end up with as far as those criminal charges, and they're typically taken down. So those statistics are not adequate. We have got to safeguard our communities. That has got to be a priority. I will tell you, there was a significant change that was done, not only with the drug courts, but back in either 2019 or 2020, we took a look at the veterans with PTSD. Some of the drug problems, some of the alcohol problems, PTSD problems. Those veteran courts have been a huge success. I'm fully in support of that type of reform. But we got to be very careful how we handle, especially these violent criminals, the repeat violent criminals. They have to be held accountable. Thanks.
We'll start with Rick on the next question. Get what number we do here. Number 8 on our list. What legislation or funding initiatives would you propose to fight human trafficking in our state?
Oh man. So we're number 3 in the entire nation for human trafficking. I don't know if you guys know that. So we're the hub in our nation where we have the 35 corridor and then we have the cross section of the I-70. So we're a huge hub for that. What did I do? I filed a bill that would propose the death penalty for anybody who's caught being a sex trafficker or or a child trafficker, or someone who's a child rapist. You know what, if you want to really put a stop to it, folks, I know that may sound extreme. You know what's extreme? There are thousands and thousands of children taken into slavery and used as little sex objects. You want to put a stop to it, you make it so extreme that people recluse at just even the thought of being caught with the crime of sex trafficking. And we also have to back our law enforcement, ensuring that they have every tool imaginable and possible to ensure that they're able to apprehend and actually be able to detect these sorts of convoys and the types of environments that foster these sort of trafficking apparatuses that they have. The border. Folks, the border is huge. We are hemorrhaging at the border. We need to close the border, do everything we can. That's why I supported sending our troops down to the border to help law enforcement. This is the whole system of the lesser magistrates. You know, the federal government is an abject failure at protecting our borders. It's their number one priority, yet they're failing. We have detrimental causes and costs that's happening right here because of what's happening at the border. And I think that many men and women would volunteer and would love to go down to the border and do everything they can to put a stop to what's happening. I think if we can just nip the bud in those two things and make it so tough of a crime for those sorts of actions, that you'll see a huge reduction in that. At least, you know, we may not stop. I gotta stop.
Thank you, Rick. Michael, I'll read the question again. What legislation or funding initiatives would you propose to fight human trafficking or in our state?
Well, first off, it's got to be a comprehensive policy. It goes back again to protecting our people, all right? It's got to be a comprehensive policy. And there's a lot of resources that are at our disposal, but we've got to get the resources and the Attorney General involved to use the access to be able to stop these things. We've already talked about the problem going on at the border. That is a huge issue. We got to stop what's coming across the border. Number two, get past the politics. There's tools out there right now that could be assisting the Missouri Attorney General in stopping human trafficking. But we need people that are going to actually talk policy and work things out rather than playing politics and putting out mailers. What am I talking about? Every person, every elected official in Jefferson City has heard us talk about the foreign ownership of land. I worked in Washington, D.C. My background is national security. Within that list, within that bill, was an enemies list. Part of the access to that enemies list is called the OFAC system, the Office of Foreign Asset Control. It is a database, enemy countries, enemy businesses, and enemy individuals. It tracks human traffickers. It tracks human traffickers. It tracks illegals coming across the border, way beyond the enemies list. We passed that with bipartisan support, and it was pulled off, it was stripped off in the Senate. That's unacceptable. Within that bill, access to the OFAC system would be given to our Attorney General. I talked to the administrator through the State Department. They're willing to do that immediately when we pass that bill. But it's got to be tied to the federal government, because the federal government has a constitutional responsibility of determining the enemies of the United States. That's why Florida's have a problem with the foreign ownership of land bill. We have got the tools. We need lawmakers, policymakers that are willing to get past the rhetoric and get the job done.
All right, Dan, same question. What legislation or funding initiatives would you propose to fight human trafficking in our state?
Well, like both Rick and Mike said, a big thing is make sure our Attorney General is funded and our prosecutors are funded. Us at the state can obviously fund our Attorney General and prosecutors to the different cities, and also backing our law enforcement to stop this human trafficking. Another big thing, the House did it. We passed 1706, it went over to the Senate. It never had an opportunity to get up on the floor because due to the 72 hours of filibustering by our own party. So we just need to keep on putting tools in the toolbox to get people working in the Senate, make the Missouri Senate work again.
All right, let's go for our third question. Question 9. And Michael will start this one.
Sure.
What will you personally do to foster civility and statesmanship in the Senate?
Well, first, for those that have heard me speak out on a campaign trail, I say that we need to elect servant leaders. And that's why what our background is so important. There's a lot of people that once they get elected, their priorities in life have changed. We need people that have lived and breathed these things. And when you look at that record prior to politics, we want to make sure that we're electing people that are actually going to get involved and get the job done. Look at the amount of anger that's out there right now. It's all right to be passionate about politics, but what is happening, Republican on Republican, especially on the floor, where you take down individuals, not based upon policy, but to take them down personally, that's wrong. Each and every one of my bills, I put a team together. We go office to office to office within both chambers. We try to hit 163 members in the House. We try to hit as many people in the Senate as we can. Our responsibility in the House. I have an open door policy. I am going to continue to do that. What is my concern? The sub-caucuses that we have are absolutely destroying the conservative agenda. And I'm going to point out specifically the so-called Freedom and Conservative Caucus. Look back to some of the things that have happened within the House as far as property rights. And in one case, we had 30 members of the Republican Party voting against the landfill that was going into Jackson County at the front door of Cass County. 24 of those members were in the Conservative Caucus. Likewise, take a look at Senator Jill Carter. She was a foundational member of the Freedom Caucus, and back in May, she said she backed out of that caucus because she said what's being done behind closed doors is not conservatism. It is a self-serving philosophy. You can check out those posts. We need to get back to working together, open the doors, cross-chamber communication, talk with the governor. Let's get the job done.
Dan, your next, same question. What will you personally do to foster civility and statesmanship in the Senate?
Far too long, I've seen the Senate flutter on conservative bills. So what I'm saying by that, people look at special interest groups and ladder climbing, moving up to the next office, looking for their next step-off point. They tout once again to special interest groups. If you're looking for a conservative senator who can do things and get things done, that's me. I will bring civility by speaking on quiet tones, not screaming, not yelling, not acting like my game's not going my way and I'm not taking my red ball and leave the playground.